Welcome to the Wisdom Check by Tabletop to Keyboard. This is going to be our bi-weekly podcast where we discuss things such as Dungeons and Dragons. Actually, I think maybe we need to turn up my mic a little bit, guys. How about some more game?
This is the intro to end all intros. Talk about Dungeons, Dragons, and
Now, I don't think that's proper. This is a family show after all. This is the intro we can use, fellas. It's good, clean fun for everyone. Welcome to the Wisdom Check, where we have wholesome conversations about the dilemmas we face every day.
Nah, hold on a second. I got your intro right here. Yeah, that's better. Welcome to the Wisdom Check. Well, I'm right, just wrong. We're gonna have guests on to talk about it. It's gonna be awesome. Because I said so.
He is right. He did say so. I don't know. Is surf music the best music for a podcast about D&D?
Fuck yeah.
Okay.
This just in, nobody can agree on our intro for this podcast. So we're just going to start. Welcome to the Wisdom Check. Roll for initiative. Fuck. A 1. It's like every time.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Wisdom Check. As always, I'm Jeff. I'm joined here with my co-host, Dustin.
Hey, everybody.
Hello. And we have two guests for you tonight. One with a camera, one without. And I'll start off with the no camera standing behind the image is Joshua Mendenhall. And then we're also joined, actually I forgot to look up your last name before we got started, Lucia I don't know how to pronounce that.
Why don't you introduce yourself, Lucia?
Yeah, we'll watch that one. Sorry, guys.
That's okay. My last name was super long. I'm Lucia Versprille. And
there we go, Versprille. Excellent.
Yes.
And she's the founder of Monstrous Incantations. And they are here because they have a really, really interesting product that is coming out in Kickstarter format right now. And it's going to be covering some pretty interesting topics, in particular Filipino folklore. So I met Joshua actually at Gamehole Con recently. That's Teen Phoenix's little get together, and I was lucky enough to have a really fun conversation. We got to share a bit of like some of the artwork and some like the general layout of the book, a little bit of the details about some of the specific entities that were in there. It's really, really fascinating stuff. So obviously we had to get you guys on the show. And so Joshua, we tend to kind of get into topics a lot of times talking about, how somebody got into gaming in the first place, because obviously it must be pretty interesting to you that kind of drove you into making games themselves.
So I'll start off with my dad started playing D&D when he was 7, because he saw his older brother playing and he was like, hey, can I play too? And then their mom went, Victor, just let him play. And so my uncle, his older brother, just said, okay, Hugh, just here's a fighter, hit stuff when we tell you to hit stuff. That led into him playing in the military, playing a lot growing up. And when I was 3, he started telling me about his D&D stories. And when I was 10, I started playing. So I never really stood a chance to not be doing this for my career.
Wow. Early start. And what about you, Lucia?
My story is less cool. I was approached by a really good friend of mine who asked if I wanted to play. They had been playing for a while. And I was like, I don't know if I'd be a good player, but I like to tell stories. So I started DMing.
Wow, we went straight to DMing.
Yeah, which was on my part a bigger undertaking than playing, but I didn't realize it until we were like a year into the campaign, but I've been doing it ever since. So
that's fantastic.
Yeah.
There's always, there's always the fear of getting into that position. So like jumping in there first really takes that off the table.
Yeah,
really
I
cool.
mean, it was for me. I was like, maybe it's just because I'm not good on group projects. I was always I was always better at doing things on individually. So I figured I'd be good at telling stories, and it ended up me running a campaign for 2 years, and I was like, oh, I haven't played like this whole time.
Now, do you play now, or is it?
Yeah, I play now. Thankfully. But I've been DMing for 3 years.
Awesome. Yeah, Dustin and I, we've been playing forever together, in fact. But
Do we got to get into years?
we always do, just to make sure we account for whatever gray hair that we have present. But
I'm winning that race. I may not be winning the beard off we have going on, but I'm winning the gray hair race. So.
But yeah, it's always interesting how people kind of get into things and what really draws them. So that's usually my next question. So I'll go ahead and jump into that. So, as Lucia, you say you jumped directly into dungeon mastering.
Yes.
Obviously that takes a lot of creativity. There's a lot of planning. There's a lot to consider in that position. Like, what are some of the things that really attract you to DMing in particular?
Well, at the time, I had all these notes for a book I was going to write. But I found myself only being really interested in like the big events that were going to happen, and I didn't want to write the in-between parts. So I had all these notes, and I was like, I'm never going to do anything with them. And so when my friend approached me, I was like, well, I'll just take all of those story arcs and I'll make it into a dungeon mastering thing. And so it was basically like I got to play out all those big events that I liked writing without having to fill in the middle parts. And
let the players do that part.
Yeah, and as the players were playing, they changed a lot of those big events for me too, because they affected the way that the world worked, and
for sure,
that was really cool for me. So
yeah, that's awesome. That's definitely something that really changes as you go, is that a collaborative process in gaming.
Yeah,
it's different than just writing, because you have all these different hands coming into it, and manipulating the story a little bit here and there, adding their flavor to it. It's interesting also to see kind of like how games translate to written material and vice versa. It's a different medium, so there's different things that kind of come up with them.
Yeah. And I think especially now too, like we're really seeing this surge in the idea of storytelling, and so it was really cool for me to have those base elements and then watch how they progressed as players interacted with them. So that's awesome. Really fun for me.
Now, Joshua, what about you? What are the things about gaming that really attract you to the hobby?
Well, my family, I kind of only know a bunch of my relatives only through storytelling. And storytelling for me was a way to reconnect with family members that I just barely missed meeting because of one sad event or another. So growing up, it was a way for me to know people who I should have known. But like, it helped me get through a lot of like bad stuff in my teenage years. But growing up, it felt as a way to learn, a way to kind of learn lessons without having to learn them the hard way. And as I got more and more into D&D, it became a way for me to have fun with my friends, essentially.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And like sometimes, part of my fun of being a permanent DM is just really messing with my players. But it's fun. It's fun to see them retell some of the stuff I put them through with like either a lot of like kind of resentment for the troubles I put their characters through, but also just the kind of joy they have when they talk about what they had to overcome.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's a big part of it. We talk about that a lot, Dustin and I, but there's so many opportunities in gaming to confront things and overcome them in a safe environment, going through stuff that you normally would hopefully not encounter in life, and understanding something about yourself as a result. I mean, it comes up from time to time.
Yeah. Or reapproaching something that you have gone through in a place where you have more power. So you helps you cope and learn how to deal with to things that have gone on as well. At least that's what a lot of people have been mentioning when we've had several guests on here that have covered the topic.
Yeah, it seems like
For
a pretty
sure.
common theme. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think with the influx of players in 5e, I think we've seen a lot more emphasis on that stuff with the storytelling. When things became more about storytelling and not just hacking, slashing X's and O's, people started realizing they could do a lot more with it, I think. And we're seeing a lot more being done with it because of that.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I think too... Oh, sorry.
You
Go ahead,
first.
Dasha. Okay. Yeah, I think especially for someone like me, I was constantly, I was always a big fan of storytelling, but as I grew up, there wasn't a lot of, it always kind of felt like there wasn't a lot of space for characters that looked like me or acted like me. And when I got into the community and I started learning about, these things, there were so many stories where there were, women who were strong, women who were beautiful, but they still had, a place in a team, and women who were compassionate. And so I think too, for me, it was being able to finally see myself in a space. And also as a woman, seeing these women, like when I first started learning how to dungeon master, I stumbled onto Team Phoenix's game mastering tips. And for me, I was like, oh my gosh, there's a woman and she looks like me and she sounds like me and she's interested in the same things as me. And I never really had that with any other kind of hobby or community. So
Yeah, it's really interesting because, obviously Dustin and I are about as Midwestern as it gets, and obviously bearded men. So we kind of fit the mold of like what you expect to see in gaming. And, so we don't have those firsthand experiences of not feeling represented. And we're hearing a lot of that. And that's something we're trying to kind of get across, and having, varied guests come on and talk about their experiences. And it's part of why we asked those questions at the start. How did you get involved? What was it that you got into? How did you find your groups and that kind of stuff? Because I think it matters a lot for people, who are watching, who maybe not here live, but maybe later on, that they see that there are people playing these games that do represent them, that are having those experiences. They are welcome in these communities, and that they bring something unique to it. And I mean, that's something we're seeing here with your product. And, we had the artwork up a second ago, but I believe it's called the Islands of Sina Una. Is that right? Yeah. And so it looks like you have taken a massive challenge on your hands of representing Philippine mythology, which is, I mean, I hate to say it, but I don't know anything about it, which is awesome, because this seems like a great opportunity to kind of get into it, kind of break out of the mold of the classic, Greek, Norse, Roman mythology that pretty much feels like bathwater to us at this point. Tolkien-esque stuff that we're all used to. And there's very little that surprises in that world. So it's really interesting to see these other cultural influences coming in now. Is this like the primary focus of your company, or is this just one of slices of things that you do?
The book in particular started off for me as a passion project. I've been doing handmade dice for about a year now, and I love doing that. But in the meantime, I was still playing games, I was still running games, and I was also working my second job with my mother, who was trying to open a Filipino restaurant in the Bible Belt of America.
Good luck.
And so I was, playing in these games, and I was watching her tackle all of her own issues with trying to do that. And as she was kind of like reintroducing me to my culture that I'd always kind of been disconnected from with food, I was then also finding just tidbits of different mythology from my time online. And I ended up running into an artist who did these beautiful art pieces for some of the deities in the pre-colonial pantheon. And I was like, I didn't even realize that we had a pre-colonial pantheon. And so it started there. And then I was learning about the different monsters. And then I was learning about all these different things that they did and how they lived. And I was like, you know, as a nerd, of course, I was like, oh my gosh, this would be so cool to put into my D&D games. And I actually put out a post and I was like, I'm looking for these creatures, and I'm looking for this influence in games, and I'd love for it to be published by a Filipino person. And people were giving me references, but of course, you know, some of them were misrepresented, some of them were done by people who didn't do all the research.
Oh no.
You know?
Oh man.
And so I was like, man, I really wish that there was a Filipino person in the TTRPG community who would do this. And then I was like, oh no, it's going to be me.
Well, that's awesome though. Not everybody sees the void and then chooses to step up into that place. I mean, it's really easy for people to see the, you know, the absence there and say, nah, I'm not going to pick up the torch and go, you know?
Yeah. And so that's when I put out that post, and then me and Joshua had actually been talking a little bit before then. And then he ended up being like, oh, you're Filipino. And so then it was like this, it just snowballed into where we're co-directing a book together and we're trying to raise money for it on Indiegogo. So
it's super awesome.
And I just put a link in chat a couple times there to the product for the crowdfunded Indiegogo site. So for those who are watching, we've already got one in chat who's looking at it and says they're going to go back. So
yeah.
We're going to get back to it already.
Very nice. Yeah, they're 10 days out, we said?
I think so. Yeah.
So 10 days to go. They are doing quite well. They're already 71% funded last I looked at it. And, you know, if any indication from like past ones, that's very likely to launch. And it's going to be exciting to hear about. Now, what are some of the things that people could expect from the project? You know, like what, in terms of if you donate to you, is there any sort of little perks? Is there anything along those lines? Or
so we have, of course, the book, which you can get in the digital file alone, or you can get it in the digital bundle, which then also comes with a digital wallpaper screen version of our GM screen, which is done by the wonderful Roxanne Sparks. Nice. She also did the cover art for us. So that will come in the digital bundle as like a, you know, you can use it on your computer. And then there's also the digital version of the map in that bundle. And then, of course, you can get the book, the physical copy of the book, which we're having printed by some really high quality printers. And then there's the physical version of the GM screen, which you can get in the bundle. And then we're looking at getting a cloth printed version of the map done, which Joshua is designing for us.
I mean, this stuff looks amazing. Like the dice in particular are really jumping out at me.
Yeah, so that's one of our add-on perks. So if you purchase at the digital bundle level or higher, you'll get an option in checkout to add the handmade dice or the character art to your checkout. So the handmade dice are done by me. There are a couple left, I think. And basically, if you go on to 5 slots, there's 5 slots left. If you go onto my website, you can choose from my back catalog of any of the dice designs that I've done previously. And then we have our wonderful character artist who did the art for our 2 new classes. We're taking slots for the new subclasses of the main classes that you get in traditional 5e. We're taking all of them and we're subclasses for the setting. And so cool. I think there are a couple slots left of those. And basically you can design a character and Betha will draw it for you and have it. Have it all designed.
6 of those.
6 of those left. Yeah.
Wow. That's really, really cool.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So it's a nice way of doing it. So Joshua, she was saying that you're working on the map there. What other elements have you specifically been focused on in this?
Well, I originally actually came onto this book just as a graphic designer.
Okay.
That was going to be doing the layout, the logo, just any graphical layout elements, and just graphic designer stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I started just getting more and more and more involved. And then I went to Gen Con, first ever Gen Con, to kind of just like meet people, talk about the book as I can. And after that, Lucia just went, "Hey, with all that you do, you're just co-director now." And I'm like, cool. Oh no. But specifically, I'm focusing a lot on how to implement a lot of the cultural stuff into the book pages.
Mm-hmm.
One of the first threads the first thread I ever did for this was on the topic of I forgot what buzzword I used, but it was just all about curation. Curation was the word I used. Mm-hmm. Where on the edges of each page, I have one of the traditional tattoos used in the Philippines, in pre-colonial Philippines, as the border.
Okay.
Okay.
That's
And
what those are.
Yeah. And I made a big point of like making sure that I only used one if I knew what it represented.
Oh, very good.
I didn't want to like do the version of some dude gets a tattoo that he thinks it means strength, but really it means duh.
Yeah, you see that all the time, right? When people throw like sometimes Oriental tattoos and stuff, and they tell you what it means, but if you don't read it, you have no clue if that's true or not. So,
my high school was in a college town in downtown. I know exactly what you're talking about. I saw way too many of those. Sure. But I'm handling a lot of that. And then in terms of game design, I'm overseeing the subclasses, one of the classes, and seeing what happens with magic items and spells.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, Joshua has been, he jokes about it, but I remember we were like going back and forth about the two new classes. Mm-hmm. And it was myself and a couple of other people from the team, and we were like talking about mechanics, and Joshua was like, because he's very, very good at all of the gameplay and balancing and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. I decided to just be like, hey, if you want, we could just go in together on this, and I could direct and do all of the content stuff, and you could help me with like the smaller, more detailed, like kind of tedious things. So he's really good at that.
It's good when you have people that don't find the tedious things tedious, right?
Yeah.
I feel really bad because I find the tedious stuff interesting, guys. Thanks.
You and me both.
I was gonna say you got Jeff in your camp. I'm more in the CS camp. I'm like, okay, you just tell me how many total buffs I have, Jeff, and just write them all out, and I'll just add it on my character later. I don't need to know where they all come from. Just let me know when they.
Oh God! Did you play Cleric Zella in 3.5? Is that what you kind of are? Just a buffomancer?
No, but I did have a character in a recent game where I was essentially a battle master. So like, it was a Pathfinder game, but I was very buff oriented and leading the team.
There was a lot.
Yeah,
we had a macro just for the buffs, just so we would post them all out.
Oh my God!
When you have to have macros for all the buffs, that's when you've gone too far, in my opinion. But
so I do want to notice something in the chat there. It looks like we already have people contributing to your project.
Oh, wow!
So some people are going to be
thank you, contributors.
Yeah, thank you.
So you guys have been talking about these classes that are new. So a lot of times when you're kind of looking through classes in a TTRPG, they're kind of generic. They can kind of fill different roles. Now, what do these new classes do that other classes can't do? Like, what sorts of stories can you tell with them that are unique? And what kinds of things are they bringing to the table? Also, what are they?
Joshua, do you want to do Headhunter, and I'll do Babylon?
Yeah, sure, I can do that.
Right.
So, people know the buzzword of like headhunting. Mm-hmm. A lot of us went through public education. I was born in a military base in Germany, but in the U.S. military, and I grew up in America going through American education. So whenever I heard headhunter growing up, it was always just, Watch as these savages, these headhunters, take down their foe. And yeah, just a big like Hollywood spiel of just look at these savages from Apocalypse Now. But as we got deeper and deeper into this, there was a lot of spiritual significance to it. And it wasn't like the warriors who are based a lot in like rituals and, you know, not faith, but just belief. And so it's this weird, you know, mix of a triangle of like, you have the fighter where they're very good at fighting, you have the paladin for the spiritual belief, and you have the ranger where they're good at, you know, roughing out in the wilderness. But it didn't really feel right to make it a subclass.
Gotcha.
So with these, it's a matter of the biggest thing for it was traditionally, historically, a headhunter would be kind of if someone went into your group, into your tribe, did someone in your tribe a wrong or committed a crime, if you were a headhunter, you would be bound to go out, find that person, take their head, come back to your town, and cast their spirit to be alongside your ancestors as a way of, hey, we're good now. And bringing that kind of mix of, I don't like to use the word, but brutality alongside mercy in terms of like, I'm not going to kill my enemy and then, you know, do a double dirty and put him down to hell. No, it's, look, we're good now. This is what had to happen.
Well, it's interesting that you're saying that you're specifically taking them back to be with your family, you know, your group. You know, it's not I mean, normally you don't bury your enemies with your family, you know?
Right.
It's a really cool thing. Is it kind of like a redemption element? Or is that just reading too far into it?
That kind of thing would depend on the person. It was tradition to cast them into it, but whether or not you personally forgave them for it or whether you wanted to give them redemption, that would kind of vary on the person. But the whole act was to make sure that the other, you know, group didn't think that you were still hungry for more. Because you didn't want to just make wanton warfare. Because warfare did happen, but it wasn't like random or, you know, chaotic.
Now, from a religious standpoint, I think in the modern Philippines, there's a heavy Catholic presence there, if I'm correct. But if you're talking pre-colonial, are you talking Hindu and Buddhism? Is it those came over from those areas when people came? Is that where you're getting some of this background for some of this stuff?
Well, actually, so pre-colonial does refer to before the Spaniards came, but when Islam and Buddhism came, they only really took a stake in one region.
Okay.
The act of headhunting itself was only outlawed in the 70s.
Wow.
Oh, wow. So it's even more current than what we're thinking. Because when you're talking pre-colonial, I'm thinking like prior to Magellan and like, you know, when all the Spaniards came and they like kind of took everything for a while.
It's wild. Yeah, no. You know, headhunting predates different cultures coming to the Philippines and sharing the culture, and predates Magellan, especially Magellan, and continued past Magellan. It only got outlawed because some police were walking around and saw some dudes with like axes and spears, and they're like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And some dude responded, "Yeah, this guy did a bad thing to my sister. We're going to go kill him." And they're like, "I'm sorry, you're going to what now?" "Yeah, we're going to kill him. What's wrong? What's the problem?" Many, and I have questions. And that's how it got outlawed.
Wow.
You think that something like the headhunting would be outlawed a lot sooner than the 1970s, but life's weird.
Yeah, I guess you would think it would just be covered in murder, but apparently not. I mean, I guess when you have a cultural tradition at play, though, it definitely changes the way the outlook is. Because I'm assuming there must be some kind of like, I don't know, rules may be the wrong words, but like traditions involved in it. So it's not just going out and just putting a beat down on somebody. You know, there's, are there elements at play in there that kind of ritualize it?
100%. While we were looking into it, we really did want to kind of avoid the very like savages look at this tradition, because like there's an element that is cool, you know. But looking into it, a lot of the times for a lot of headhunters, they would ask for permission from their spiritual leaders. They would look to specific deities. They would watch particular omens. So it wasn't just like, oh, this guy stole my stuff, so I'm going to go over there and I'm going to take his head and I'm going to be like, ha ha, this guy,
Right.
you know. It was very like, I have this, you know, whatever in my heart, like feeling, and I need to settle it. And so for some communities, it was very ritualistic in that they were asking for permission. For some, it was that was just how they protected themselves. So there's definitely some elements of, you know, they weren't just like, I'm going to go over there and I'm going to get as many heads as I want, you know.
Well, and they're not a bounty hunter. This isn't bounty hunting. Right. It's to separate it out from that as well. Like, you're not taking contracts out of these people. Like, it's a completely separate sort of deal.
Yeah, and like Joshua said, you know, when you did bring back a head, they would, if I'm remembering correctly, they would chant the blessings and assure that the spirit knew where it was. And then they would shake it so that any of the remaining anger was released. And then they would they would take salt or limes or any sort of like spiritual cleansing element and rub it through the eyes as a signal of like kind of like, you don't have your eyes on me.
Oh, okay.
Kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then they would bear it to kind of purify it. So it was still very respectful. Like, you could go out and, you know, you'd have a guy's head, but it was still very like, you know, but this is where we bury that axe, because it was also one of those things where they deeply believed in the fact that if you weren't respectful to that spirit, it could come back and get you, you know?
Right.
So
absolutely. I guess.
And that probably feeds back into those religious influences in the area. Is where a lot of that then draws back in from. Because if you were to take that under, you wouldn't get that sort of result if you were to take it from the Catholicism aspects of the Spaniards that they brought in. You're not going to get that same sort of idea. They wouldn't do that same sort of thing. It'd be a very different way of taking that same concept. It'd come out very differently.
Yeah, headhunters were very. Most of them were like higher up in the mountains. At least if I'm remembering correctly, but
majority of them,
yeah. So they were not only like very skilled in combat, but they were very adept at, you know, like land traversing. A lot of headhunting tribes that survived for a while were some of the most like self-sustainable communities because they were also very good farmers. And so they, most of them believed that your skull contained your soul. And so they would then continue to use them for certain rituals to bless their crops and things like that. So it was very respectful to those spirits, especially when it came to that practice.
So in the context of a game, you know, a lot of times you have these ideas of, you know, religious figures or, you know, like rogue types, you know, archetypes that kind of flow out there. And then they have to be gamified to some capacity. So what are the sorts of things that a headhunter is going to be able to do within the context of a game?
Exact specifics we're trying to avoid because we want to avoid publicly talking about our stuff until it's like more hammered out and play tested. But ideally, the big name that we have in our abilities is the many-limbed silhouette.
Oh, okay.
Which is all revolving around getting attacks in to either buff yourself or debuff someone else. And to have an easier time with intimidation.
Okay. Now, is there kind of like a broad strokes, like not details of like how it works, but like broad strokes of the kind of flavor of abilities that they have? I mean, obviously that's a pretty cool one. Many limbs.
It sounds like a melee class for sure.
It can be, yeah. trying to think about. So in pre-colonial Philippines, a lot of actual combat was based around dodging, and getting hit could severely, not just like hurt you, injure you, but it would have someone knowing they had an advantage on you, knowing they had that one more edge on you. And it's the idea of, as long as you can hurt someone, you can gain advantage on someone. Gotcha. Advantage with a lowercase a, not an uppercase a.
Yeah, no double dice. Yeah,
that's a special thing that we had to talk about with our design team.
Okay, so that's pretty cool. So are they taking more of kind of a martial flavor, or are they getting more of kind of a magically infused thing?
More of a martial flavor with magical stuff to supplement it. Okay. This class, like our other class, is very much rooted in the animism belief and faith, which is all about how there are definitely spirits of any X object or thing of nature. And Lucia referenced that they paid attention to omens, and exactly what flavor your headhunter takes is based on what omens comes to them the most.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So is that how you separate your archetypes then under that? Like, usually the level 2, 3, you take an archetype, so it would be like omens would be kind of what you would then subspecialize in.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. If you give me a moment to try and find the exact image here that has a listing for the subtypes for each class. Let's see here. Headhunter, it's omens of war, omens of the soul, and omens of the hunt.
Okay.
Nice. So these are pretty cool. I like this.
Now, I imagined, and without knowing too much about anything dealing with Filipino lore, that there would be a lot more seafaring. There would be a lot more based around being, as an island nation, like with a chain of islands, you'd have a lot more seafaring stuff in there as well. Like, is that a big part of this class just seems like they're more land-based, the overland travel, things like that. But is there a fair amount of ocean-based stuff as well in the books?
Yeah, actually, right now I'm trying to hash out rules for smaller boat travel and smaller boat warfare, because Saltmarsh introduced better rules for sea and water vehicles, but they're more designed towards larger vessels. Your galleons, your tremors, nothing really for like 5-person sailboats, 5-person rowing boats. So we have rules for that, but it's also a matter of, we don't want to limit a class or a subclass to only being good if they're in a boat.
Yeah,
it's kind of like a worse version of like, haha, yes, I'm playing a knight. I have my gallant sword and shield and my horse. And someone responds with, we're going into a cave.
Right.
At least they were nice enough in this edition that the horse just disappears and reappears later when you need him again. You had to tie him up and find him dead or dragon food when you came back out, like in second ed back in the day,
I'm from 3.5, where it's like, I summoned my mount. They're here for 1 hour, and then they're gone for the day. You can't ride your horse for more than 1 hour? No. But aren't you a chosen servant of like your almighty deity? Yes, and their will works for 1 hour.
I always like to imagine it more kind of like He-Man when he hits the tiger and it turns into the bonded mount for like that 1 hour, and then it goes away back to this little like timid cat again. Like, I always imagined it wanted to be more like that, right? But no, so you are looking at some boat rules, other things that are going in there for smaller ship to ship sort of combat.
Yeah. And one of our subclasses, actually, the ranger, is the Mangangaya, which is sea raider, or someone who raids the sea. And the biggest thing was looking at the fighting style and the kind of the mentality of the Timawas, which were warriors in their own social caste from the Visayan region in the Philippines, and looking more at how they fought and what their mentality was like, and less of, they go on boats. That's their thing. You want to play a ranger? I hope you like boats.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think it is really important to have kind of a broad, area to play in as any character. You don't want to be too hyper focused.
Water was definitely a influence for a lot of things. One of my favorite stories from the Philippines is that's actually the reason that a lot of Spaniard forces failed, was because people native there were so traversed in going through the water quickly, and they came in there heavy armor, and they're trying to get back into their boats, and all the natives are like, well, you're stuck there. So
it really is not a landscape just geographically that really really lends to heavy armor. Like it just between the mountainous, the volcanoes, like there's not a lot there that screams I should strap on heavy armor and trot on in.
I was gonna say, hot and humid does not sound like the place to wear armor.
Which is funny you say that, because there actually was evidence of armor in pre-colonial Philippines. It's just never talked about, because when people want to portray, the savage island nation of the Philippines, it's always some dude with a spear, a shield, and like a loincloth made of grass.
Right. Yeah. So we do have the other class I want to touch on here in a second, but we had a question from chat that I need to address. So Airlaser wanted to know if there is a module in the book for this setting and these elements.
Yeah, so we'll have a part of the book for if you want to run like your own setting. So you'll have all the details for the map, obviously, and the different places and NPCs. But we'll also, with the goal right now with the Indiegogo, is just like a short little 1st to 3rd level adventure module to kind of get you introduced. We were hoping that if we hit, any stretch goals, that we could expand into further levels. But for now, it's already going to be a pretty big book with all the content in it. So 1 to 3 seemed like a good kind of starting place for everybody to get comfortable and acclimated, and then kind of go.
Absolutely. All right, great. So then we had this other class. You said it was the Babaylan?
Babaylan, yeah.
Babaylan?
So this one was really fun for me because I have always felt very connected with like the idea of quote unquote witchcraft.
Okay.
So Babaylans are different from other casting classes. Druids, get their power from nature, and wizards get it from learning, and sorcerers get it from like their inherited blood. Whereas Babaylans get it from communing with spirits and being connected to the sky world.
Okay.
So the character art did for us for the campaign, the Babaylan has like these beautiful herbs, and but he has this big snake, kind of
looks awesome,
incorporeal creature, and that's kind of the main focus of the class. Is you had an Abayan, which was kind of like your incorporeal companion that they would channel through.
Cool.
Historically, they were spiritual leaders in their communities. They were considered like the high kind of priestess of that region, of their little town or larger town. And a lot of the accounts of them are they were mostly healers. We're trying not to limit it to just being able to heal. We want it to be, nice and open for players. But one of my favorite aspects about their historical readings was that they would heal people by having a spirit either possess them as a Babaylan, or the spirit would possess their patient. And it would kind of, that's how they would cast their magic. So I'm really excited.
That's a
to play
really
with
cool
that
one.
element.
Because that definitely it fits into that kind of otherworldliness, that like the passageway between life and death, being this kind of mysterious conduit. It's tying into that animism very nicely with the spirits. That's a really flavorful concept.
Yes. Yeah, it's definitely it's very close to me specifically, because I hear a lot of stories about my family in the Philippines of my great Lola, or my grandmother, who was the kind of village witch.
Oh,
And
cool.
it was, these stories of her either pulling out the bad spirits or infusing in the good spirits. So it's been a lot of fun to work on it.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's got to be something just really wonderful, be able to reach back and to look at not like ancient history, but like lived experience and say,
Sure.
this is part of it. This is where we are as a people and that sort of thing. Like, you said you were kind of reaching back now and trying to get back into culture. Like, I'm half Cuban, but we don't have a lot of stories. We don't have a lot of interaction with that part of my family. So it's that I feel that kind of absence of culture from that side that I very much want to kind of get in touch with. I don't know that they have as much of a rich uniqueness to their folklore and stuff that's separate from, other things we kind of come into, but it's fascinating to me kind of see this as an opportunity to kind of tie into your family like that.
Yeah. And I think for like me and Joshua have talked in length about how researching specifically pre-colonial Philippines has brought us a lot closer to the culture. Just because, like we talked about earlier, modern Philippines is a lot different, and the kind of religion that lives there, the way that they operate, like all those things are good and we appreciate them. But for me, at least, I never really connected with that side of my culture. And so to learn that a lot of it came from other places where, like these religions and these ways that they thought about women, or like we didn't have like an LGBT plus community, but there were people that existed on the islands as that identity. And when those colonial influences came in, it was kind of condemned, and it was this, thing that was wrong. And personally, I've never believed in those thoughts. And so to hear that those things existed and it wasn't necessarily like a community or a thing that we were fighting for, it just kind of was.
It just was a thing. Yeah, it wasn't.
And so like to hear that has been really cool for me. And I even got to teach my mom about some of those things, and for her to be like, well, that's so cool that, if you were in pre-colonial Philippines and you were like, I identify as a woman now, this is my name, that's just how it was. Like there wasn't any sort of condemning around it. And so for I think a lot of these cultures where we've been colonized, it's very refreshing to look at those roots. And so that's been really cool for me and for a lot of the team.
Oh, I can imagine. Like, Joshua, do you have any experiences like that where you stumbled onto some just really interesting folklore, not folklore necessarily, but just cultural components that really struck a chord with you?
Yeah, right. Put me on the spot when I'm in an interview. I prefacing this, I didn't know any of this up until I started working on this book. And really up until working on this book, I never really even identified as Filipino. And if I had to explain to someone that I was, Filipino, I would say, I'm Filipino Chinese, or I'm Filipino something or else or other. Just anything to do to not be seen as Filipino. It's actually a thing that a lot of Filipino diasporas do, where they try and lessen how much you're seen as being Filipino. I know I'm not answering your question, but
that's interesting. I didn't know that was a thing.
No, there's this Filipino psychologist who did surveys and took in studies and asked people about it, and like a lot of Filipino people, if they're not in the Philippines, a lot of them will do a lot of what they can to not identify as Filipino. And when I started working on this book, learning all that I could, I stopped doing that.
Is there like a certain stigma that I'm not aware of with Filipinos specifically that causes that?
Well, I said Filipino diaspora. There's this thing where a lot of Filipinos are leaving the Philippines or just aren't born in the Philippines, so that the majority of the Filipino population in the world isn't actually in the homeland.
Gotcha.
And a lot of times, Filipinos who are born in places like the UK or America, they'll see the third world country, so they're from that lineage, and they'll think, I need to separate myself from this because being third world is filthy.
Okay, so that's where the stigma comes in, is that whole idea of this like third world like country that's probably not even really that true, is it?
No.
Like at all?
No, like there's like some bad parts, but I mean, I'm from the Detroit area.
There's bad parts in America. So.
Yeah, so like, sure, guys, the entire country is there. No, like there are beautiful places in America, and there are beautiful places and beautiful people, and it's a place like any other place. So all this folklore mythology helped me not to do that anymore, and we've gotten word from other people who are Filipino who are like, I never really knew about this stuff. It's really cool to learn about this, and all I can think of is, I'm glad this is working. I'm glad this has to work like this. But to more directly answer the question, because I didn't know anything about the Filipino folklore, learning everything about it was just kind of jarring. Because it was, this should be a part of me. This should have been a part of me my entire life. But because it's so not often talked about, that part was jarring by itself. But if I'm talking specifics, the Celestial Eaters really got to me. Because I played D&D. I've done D&D stuff for most of my entire life. I haven't really stood a chance to not do D&D for most of my life. And so I'm always thinking about, what big threat could I throw at people? What's a big monster I could throw at people? What's a big threat? And I was reading into this. I'm like, oh, we have one dragon. One dragon. Cool. What do? Oh, they eat the moon. Cool. They eat the moon.
No big deal.
So these are dragons, you said?
There's one dragon.
There's just one.
Just one. If you look at our book name, our book logo, you see that S that's kind of stylized?
Yeah, the red one?
Yeah. No, the white in Sina, right?
Yeah.
Is that the S you're talking about?
Yeah. That's Bakunawa, who is this titanic sea snake eel serpent dragon who will one day rise back up from the oceans and devour the moon. And I thought, this is amazing. We're like, if we're going to do a logo, it's got to be a big honking dragon. The dragon's going to be part of our logo. And then we started reading more and more into this stuff, and we realized, what do you mean that's not the only thing that wants to destroy the moon?
Yep.
Okay, so there's clearly a moon thing going on here then. So you got a dragon that wants to eat the moon. Does the moon hold a significance in Filipino folklore?
Well, animism, of course, is playing into this, and of course, there's a spirit and goddess of the moon. Okay. But while other mythologies take the moon as the sign of like it's the anti-sun, or it's chasing after the sun, or it is some such or other, it's rebirth, it's life, it's whatever. The moon for us has this theme of, there are a lot of things in this world, a lot of things in this life that want to do us harm. And with the moon, we have a chance to get it before it gets us, that it gives us a fighting chance. And all the stories about, the moon being destroyed, being eaten, being webbed up, something to cause the eternal eclipse. It's always about, if this happens, we don't have that light anymore, and all kinds of darker spirits will have free reign.
So whereas in a lot of other culture, the moon is associated with night, which is associated with the bad things like werewolves, vampires, these other sorts of things. And you're looking at it as a chance, like this is the light that protects you from those things, because when the moon is bright and it's vibrant, you can see, and those things can't get the jump on you, and it's almost then more of a protector than.
Yeah, because we in this book, when we do the monster part, there's definitely plenty of things that are far scarier. Like, our vampires are on a whole different kind of level.
Okay.
And so, yeah, like, and jumping off of, those things like lurking in the, jungle forests at night, like, you would definitely want to have that moonlight to be able to see, through the canopy, okay, that's where my hut is, or that's where my home is. I gotta get there. And there's a lot connected to the moon for this particular setting as well, because there were originally 7, and all of them were personified as people. And so one of the very significant goddesses, Halia, is the last kind of standing moon. And so her main enemy is this eel dragon who devoured some of her siblings, essentially.
Oh, wow.
And so she's not only protecting her remaining siblings, but herself and also everybody on Earth. So the moon is also very significant in that sense as well.
That's awesome. So Chad is asking us, they want to hear more about the vampires.
Okay. So by far the most iconic one is probably the Manananggal, which is a female presenting creature who in the daytime is, a normal, beautiful, very alluring woman. And then at night, she'll find a secluded tree and she'll separate her torso from her legs.
Oh, okay.
That was our reaction.
Take those off. Yeah.
That was our reaction too. Yes.
And then she'll sprout these gigantic bat-like wings.
As you do. Yeah.
And then she'll hunt you down in the middle of the night and try to eat you and your babies.
So wait, I got to stop for a second. She detaches from her legs.
Right.
And do the legs then just like hang out in the woods next to some tree?
Yes.
Like she stashes them in the tree? Or...
So this is
amazing.
My other favorite part of the story is that in order to kill one of them, you have to find the legs wherever they are. And you have to, some of them, they spread ash of like a certain kind of tree. Some of them spread salt, kind of like a purifying agent to then kill the legs so that when she comes back to get them, to put them back on, they're not there. And so she dies.
So it's like finding a lich's factory.
Yeah. We vampire just like the rest of you. We put our legs back on or we're dead.
So there are some accounts from certain regions where like she'll separate her torso and then like her vital intestines will just kind of hang out while she's flying. Somebody that I used to work with who was from a different region of the Philippines said that in her stories, they separated from the shins so that you wouldn't hear their footsteps or something like that. There are also, I believe there are some accounts where she also has a ginormous and terrifyingly long tongue.
Okay.
Which has its uses.
Sure.
So
it's good when you don't have legs, you can walk with your tongue.
That's one of our kind of vampire-esque creatures.
That's crazy.
Just lots of vampirism going about.
That was one of the first creatures that I found that I was like, I'm gonna put this in my games, and then watching my players have to go find a pair of legs in the forest was a lot of fun.
Love it.
And just when you think by 5th edition that every possible cultural undead had been mined, no. I'm pretty sure that does not exist in any compendium in 3.5, any of them, no.
There are some, there's another woman, she lures specifically men, similar to sirens, but instead of having that like mermaid-like element, they're actually called Mandarangkal, which is like a translation of mantis. And so they would take on traits similar to mantises in the Philippines, and they would cut your head off with the like scythe-like claws and stuff like that.
Lovely.
So, yeah.
I always thought it was really interesting looking at the mythology because, it plays on a culture's fear of the unknown. So I would imagine a lot of the traditional stories we hear from other cultures are about the, traversing land at night, like going out into the swamp is a terrifying thing, who knows what's out there? The monsters, the tough terrain, and it's just an unworldly, spooky place. So of course there's lots of weird creatures that live in the swamp,
Right.
And I'm fascinated by these particular ones you're talking about because I'm wondering what the origin of the stories might have been. Like what was the lesson you were supposed to be getting from these odd things?
I know that there's one that is kind of similar to like an ogre-like being, but they called them, I'm probably going to butcher the word, but it's buningnis or similar, something along those lines, which basically meant like to smile or to giggle.
Okay.
And they're a cyclops creature, and they have like a constant smile on their face and these big two tusks, kind of similar to like orcs. They were very saber-toothed kind of style. And so when they went back to try and kind of find where that came from, they found skulls similar to mammoths. And so the tusks came from the tusks of like these mammoth-like creatures.
And the one opening at the front.
Yes, and the one opening at the front they thought was the one eye. So it's those kind of things that are really interesting to know, that they do have influence and of a place where they started. So
it's always been fascinating because, all around the world you have mythologies of dragons, or one dragon in this case. But I mean, to me, that seems like that comes naturally from mining, right? So you mine, you find dinosaur bones. What the heck is this thing? Oh my God, there be dragons,
Right.
And I'm kind of, a lot of times you have like the Cyclops was also an elephant, at least according to what I've seen. So it's fascinating. You find these things around societies as they're developing, as they're finding these skulls and stuff. And they're like, there's got to be a story about this.
Right.
Who has a femur this long? Oh my God.
Right.
I'm going to tell everybody I killed this thing.
Yeah, it's been really cool to see the different things, because like obviously like the eel inspired dragon is really cool, but the other celestial eaters are, my favorite one is the giant crab.
There's a giant crab.
Yes.
Yeah. And so the story goes that it lives in this giant hole in the ocean. And when it comes out of it, that's when the tide is low, because all of the water is rushing to fill in the hole that it lives in. So he's that big.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's cool having a little, well, not little, I mean, that's a pretty massive explanation, for these worldly issues. Especially, I mean, if you're looking at that kind of topography around you too, that so much, water nearby, you've got the mountainous terrain, tropical land, so you have all these themes kind of at play. Like there's a lot of nature hitting you in the face, like right then and there.
So there's a lot of volcanic activity in the Philippines. Is that associated with the dragon then also?
No. The volcanoes and the dragon weren't necessarily linked up together. The dragon more played into the moon and the cycles of the moon. The volcanoes in the Philippines always had their own stories to it. And we actually carried one real life story over into our world.
Oh, cool.
You take this one.
There is, though, one of our celestial eaters is connected to a volcano, a different one. But he is a giant spider.
Well, that's it. Me and Jeff are out. It's been a good episode. I hate spiders. That's it. We're done.
Nice. Oh my god!
Call her up quick.
You don't like spiders?
Talk about
Oh my god! Can I tell this one then, Lucia?
Go for it.
Yeah, go ahead.
So the Philippines is composed of a bunch of different ethno-linguistic groups, right? There are 185 of them, and there's always going to be differences in storytelling within the regions.
Wow.
And actually, this spider actually came about from one of those differences, because there's Tom Banocano, and he's the giant crab. He resides in the ocean that Lucia was just talking about.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a variation where crawling around in the depths of the earth, biding his time, still the child of the sun and moon, is Tom Banokawa or Tom Banokua. And one day he is going to climb up from the depths of the earth, web up the moon, because he is that large, and that will start the eclipse.
Huh.
And so in in Sina Una, one of the volcanoes is referred to as the Pit. And it's believed that when Tom Banokua emerges, that's where he's going to enter the world.
Oh, so the spider's gonna come out of a volcano.
Yeah, imagine just a continental-sized volcanic spider.
You know, in the West, when you have a spider that size, you have to burn down your house. So what you're saying is this one's going to come crawling out of molten lava. So we can't even burn the place down and get rid of him at that point. Like it's officially over.
Oh yeah, actually, that reminds me, off topic here, but I got a friend who's got a serious phobia of spiders, and we play this game called Soombroom, and we absolutely love it. It's a great RPG, but it's described that, you know, the barbarian clans in that game, some of them worship spiders, and he was like, okay, that's kind of creepy, but there's no pictures for it. Cool, whatever. He flips the page, and taking up the page is like bottom like 11th of the page. There's a little person, and then filling up the rest of the page is this towering, colossal-sized albino white tarantula staring down at you, the viewer. And then he said, "We got to stop playing Soombroom."
I think there's also a different kind of view of some of the spiders in the Philippines, because one of my favorite stories that my mom used to tell me was they would hold like spider fighting rings.
Oh wow.
And so when I went home to see my Lola, and I was asking her, I was like, how does that work? And so what they do is you get a little stick and you collect 2 of these spiders, and they're like beta fish. So when they see each other, they just want to fight. And so you put them on the 2 ends of the stick, and as soon as they see each other, they'll start fighting. And so you'll have your spider and your friend will have his spider. And it's kind of like, it's this sport that they'll play in their communities. And, you know, if your spider wins, then like you trade your lunch or whatever it is. And so whoever's was webbed first was.
Oh, they web each other. Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, I'd seen ones where there was like I think there were Goliath beetles maybe, and like they try to get to be the highest point. So if they see another one, they'll pick them up and they'll chuck them off the leaf that they're on. So it's like this big like wrestling sumo match. Oh, come on, Clint. You put a spider on my head. Are you serious?
Oh, yeah. He got you. Got you good.
Yeah.
There was a brief moment where I saw something, because, you know, the stream is ran through his computer, and something popped up in front of our faces real quick. And I knew he was grabbing an image for something.
Oh, he's creepily making it move away.
At least he picked you, not me.
It's just wait, it's coming. It's coming.
Yeah, he's got to pull it back up on that side. I'm done.
It's not cool, man. It's not cool.
You know what's funny about that? I'm looking at the stream on the screen. The size of that spider image is about a good size comparison, because the eye in Sina Una is a moon. And comparing the size of that moon to that spider is a really good comparison of how big Tom Banokua is.
Yikes.
No, thank you. So aside from terrorizing us with spider stories, what other types of stories does this setting and this game world allow you to tell that are unique to it?
Oh boy. Well, our other volcano, we have 3 main ones. So that one obviously is the pit. The other 2, one of them is actually a real mythology that still exists and people still believe in, is the story of 2 lovers. I believe it was he stumbled upon her bathing one day, and he was like, oh, I don't want to look, I want to be respectful. But she actually slipped and fell. And so he saved her life, and they fell in love. And he was a chieftain's son, and she was a princess. And so, they fell in love. But there was another guy who was like, I think she's so pretty, and I want to be her husband. So he basically waged war on the chieftain's son. And they went to battle, and they fought, and the chieftain's son ended up winning. And so him and his lover were reunited. But last minute, one of the opposing warriors shot him with an arrow, and he died on the battlefield. And so what ended up happening was that his lover ran over to him, and she was like so devastated that she, Romeo and Juliet took his dagger and joined him in the afterlife immediately after. And her father buried the 2 of them together, and their love continued to burn as like the magma lava. And so the 2 of them formed this volcano, and it said that she resides within the mountain and that he makes up the clouds and the smoke that comes out. So that one was really cool to me, because if you actually look up that mythology, I believe like the Lover's Volcano in the Philippines, it'll pull up. There are like pictures where people will take pictures of like the lava and the smoke, and they'll be like, oh, you can see the 2 lovers in the clouds. So that one is really cool. And then the other volcano that Joshua and one of our researchers came up with was the one based on the rice terraces. Joshua, if you want to talk about that one.
You said rice terraces, like the farming area? Okay.
Yeah, the rice terraces farming area. So real quick segue, we were looking to see if we could have rice terraces in our world at all, because we thought they were like, pre-colonial, and they were like,
okay.
Wait, are they? Oh God, are they? If they aren't, we can't use them. We can't use one of these pieces of art that we paid a lot of money for. Oh God, can we use them? And we can.
I was under the impression that those were pre-colonial.
They are, but they're not 2,000 years old as people like to say they are. And that was the real debacle, because some of them were proven to be post-colonial. But only some of them were post-colonial. Pre-colonial, they were used for taro root.
Yeah.
Okay. So we are able to use them in our world. But right off the bat, I knew I wanted to have just a huge city, But the only way for that to happen is to have religious and trade reasons for it to be there.
Sure.
Because that's how most cities begin, or how they start out.
Yeah. Trade's a big deal in the Philippines. I mean,
trade has been. Oh yeah, it's monumental there. And we want to have a big city. Well, to have a big city, you got to have, food. Fishing is huge, as is farming, and so we wanted to have rice terraces, volcanic rice terraces, and we love the sound of that. And we thought, okay, cool, but how are you going to have rice terraces that can feed an entire huge city? We thought volcanic ash is good for soil, is good for farming. We can have volcanic ash, people who can use some farming techniques and some magic to help it along. So we have food for an entire city. But then we have the problem of, hey, so we have this entire city and rice terraces built around a volcano. How do you not die?
Yeah.
And the answer came through animism. Everything has a spirit. Every aspect of nature has a spirit. And so part of animism is to ask a spirit, to give praise to a spirit, to give tribute to a spirit, for it to not do something bad, or for it to do something good for you. And we figure a good thing to ask would be, please give us more ash. A bad thing to avoid would be, hey, please don't murder everyone.
Just a little thing.
Just a little thingy, little
Yeah,
tidbit.
just a little something there, right? Yeah.
And so we have the idea of, well, in this city, we need people whose jobs aren't actually directly related to farming. So we thought, well, what if there's a prayer hall? What if there's just this hall of worship where people are constantly giving thanks to this volcano spirit? And so now we have this huge city that gives homage to two different spirits. One is the volcano spirit, to thank it for not destroying everyone, for helping us with the crops. And another one for helping us not suffer the worst part of monsoons. Because in the Philippines, a lot of places were built out of temporary or lightweight materials. So when monsoon season came, they could just move locations. But if you don't have to worry about monsoons, you don't have to move. You could just keep one permanent residence. So 2 prayer halls, 1 for each spirit. And we have this giant volcano named Nulkab, and the city of Kalahan. And a cool part of this, actually, I see Lucia smirking, is that Kalahan is both the name of the city and the name of the Babaylan who first contacted Nulkab to ask for this bargain. And thankfully, she's agreed to this. We're modeling Kalahan after Satine Phoenix.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I was talking to our game whole con, and I asked her about it. Told her how much she means to Lucia, and asked her, we wanted to know if you would be okay with being an NPC in our book. And, when you ask to use a likeness of someone, typically you would have to pay, because you're using their likeness in your work. But she had us back with, yes, of course, please. Do you want, I could do a video for you guys. And that's how we got our campaign trailer.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. So is that on the Indiegogo somewhere that I'm not seeing?
If you click the video up at the very top.
I'll have to do it when I'm not on the stream. That's really awesome. That is freaking cool. That's a big moment.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. The best part about that, the best part about that was when I was going to GameholeCon, Lucia suggested I do that half as a joke, half as a serious thing. And that night of talking to her, I was like, hey, guess what?
That's how it works. You just got to get out there and try. Like, you never know what's going to happen. Just ask people. People want to get involved all the time. And with the gaming industry, it seems like it's big, but it's small. There's a few people doing really big things.
Gaming's been around forever, but I feel like as far as community-wise, I feel like it's still a fledgling thing. Like, I feel like it's as far because maybe just because of the streaming and everything that's being done now, that there's actually more community to it. When we started gaming 20 years ago, it was just us in a basement with a table. Like, there was no real larger community to it. There was a few of us that did it, and that was kind of it. Like, so. Oh yeah, definitely. Like, I remember growing up, I didn't have a group, every day. I would play D&D on online forums. And that was the small community that I could form up, because there wasn't anything like this, what we have now when I was growing up. I remember I was 10, I started playing D&D, and it was literally just me, 5 high schoolers, and 2 of our dads there. It resembled nothing like what we have nowadays. Yeah.
It's a different world.
It's amazing when you hear about, like, when people are willing to be like a part of these other things. Like, it's just things that we'd have never fathomed back when we were getting into the hobbies. We'd have never imagined it would get to this point. But I still feel like, even as far as it's come, like, this is just, I think with 5E's introduction, this is just like the first wave of, as this thing's going to continue to grow and grow, I think, as we go forward with it.
Yeah, the hobby is booming. It's not going to slow down anytime soon.
No, definitely not.
Oh, definitely. Because, like, years and years ago, Acquisitions Incorporated started doing their, streams, and you see where they are now. They're a headline game at PAX U this year. Critical Role came around, and they, forced Mystery Science Theater 3000 to give up a belt live on stream for most funded Kickstarter campaign. Lucia and I went to a charity show that was all just a one big D&D game. Like, it's a big thing. It's becoming bigger, and it feels like it's going to be a longer time running, like than how it was back in like the 80s. Because it's more focused on being with other people, focused on the storytelling aspect of it, and being a place for people to just be.
Yeah, for sure. It's a golden era to be in gaming. I mean, we've been playing for so long, seeing kind of evolve along the way, and just there's so many different types of games now. It's not just D&D or just World of Darkness or just Shadowrun. It's like there's everything under the sun now, and then probably more stuff that I don't know about. And if there's a game out there that you want to play, it probably exists. There's probably some module, there's probably some book, there's something out there ready for you. It's just a matter of getting out there and getting it exposed, finding it. Which is, I mean, again, I'm finding things through this show that I would have never come across any other way. Sure. And it's making me want to play more and better games. Like we have amazing games already, but you've seen these little pieces added in, major pieces really in and of themselves, but they give inspiration to add something more, to types of characters you make, or the backstories you decide to do, or the stories you decide to tell as a DM. Because again, I mean, these sorts of monsters and stuff, I mean, monsters are monsters, but they also kind of help you, like I was saying before, help you come up with a story. There's some meaningful element there that underlies it. There's some cultural story that's being told, like there's a moral, or there's some kind of lesson that's being extended out in this metaphoric sense. And I love seeing that stuff, because as you dip in these other cultures and you see that, it makes you look back at the ones you already have in a different way.
Yeah. And I feel like, too, with the expansion of the community, for as long as D&D has been around, there's still so many things that are untapped about it. And so many of these games that, you could play it this way or whatever, but there's still things that people don't even know about. And so, especially with this book, it's like, wow, D&D's been around for so long, but I've never seen any of these creatures in any of the monster manual, and et cetera, et cetera. And so I think it's one of the easiest communities to feel like, if you have a story to tell that no one's ever told before, it's one of the best platforms to be able to get it out there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, and that's in a weird way, it's the advantage of coming from like a culture and subculture that's just not that widely known of, is that you can bring these things and no one has ever seen them. They're completely new experiences, like, and you can put them right out there and people are going to gravitate because like, what the heck is that thing that just detached its legs, grew wings, and is now trying to attack me with its 15-foot long reach tongue? Like, what is that? Like, you're not going to find that anywhere else, right? Like, it's...
Can I tell you, that's not the strangest thing that I found while doing this research. That's like kind of middle of the road for us now.
Well, we don't want you to reveal anything more.
Well,
at this point.
got Gene Simmons.
What we've already tread over. It's.
Let's be perfectly honest. Gene Simmons is like a CR-14 encounter. You're not really sure what to do, but he's going to do something. But no, like the strangest thing I found so far in terms of just like monsters to encounter is there's this serpent, green, covered in prickly hairs on the scales, has a red crest on its forehead, and its defense mechanism is if you injure it, it turns into 100 of itself.
Yes.
And that face you have right there, where you're just kind of like, did I fucking hear that right? Sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear.
It's in the intro. If you didn't get to hear the intro, we drop an F-bomb in the intro just so everyone knows what they're getting into.
Fair enough. Yeah, no, just the face is like, did I fucking read that right? What the fuck am I looking at? That's like the exact emotion I felt of just, you've touched me. What? There's going to be 100 of me now. What? Boom. 100 of it.
Yeah. Can't wait to see that played out on a Roll20 board somewhere. Here it is in a 5-foot square. Not only got to make 99 more of them.
You're just all the other.
like the worst version of 99 Love Balloons and just like crashing someone's computer as you just import and copy paste 99 more snake tokens.
As if Action Economy wasn't already in the DM's favor.
So in a kind of a tangent, before the stream, we were talking about one topic that was kind of an interesting one that I think will come up in this case. We've been talking a lot about how this is very specific to actual lore. It's rooted in actual history, actual people. And so there is an importance there to do it correctly as a player or as a DM. And we were talking a little bit about how some people have approached you guys about, is it okay for me to play this if I'm not part of this culture? Like, how do I respect it? How do I treat it in a way that's going to come across correctly? Do you have any tips for that? Or any comments, I guess?
Well, when we were first starting making the book, it was definitely something that I had considered of, am I even comfortable running this as somebody coming into it completely new? But like we had discussed earlier before the stream, I had to think about it as, well, I use Greek gods and Norse gods and, Roman influences time in my campaigns. So why would it be any different? And so for people who, aren't part of the culture, I think it's really important to see these influences in your games because it does a lot for your storytelling, your diversity, and it also makes, people who are a part of that culture able to see themselves in those games comfortably. Because when I first started as a player after DMing for so long, I played an Asian coded character in my game. And immediately it was kind of like being reduced to an anime girl because I'm the Asian one at the table. And that was something that always kind of steered me away from playing as an Asian coded character or even at tables in general, because I was like, well, I don't want to be like the token of the group.
Now, was that coming from outside or is that an internal feeling?
It was definitely kind of both. I didn't really consider it at first, just because playing as an Asian coded character was just like playing as myself. I'm Asian every day. It was, when I started role playing, and it would kind of be like, I would make a comment in character and somebody would comment over me like a joke about, an anime that I'd never seen, or make a joke in like the 5 Japanese words they knew, even though I wasn't Japanese.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Those kind of things that make you uncomfortable at a table, to be like, well, I guess I'll be European next time, because then you won't make like a British joke at me or whatever it is. And so for a long time, like, I didn't want to play as somebody with my eye shape or, my skin complexion, because it was always like, oh, you're that character at the table. And so I think it's important to also see these games as somebody who's not a part of that culture, so that when somebody like me sits at your table, they're not going, oh, I'm that character. Because they're seeing NPCs that are normalized the same way that anybody else would be.
Now, a lot of times at a table, there's a lot of, there's a little more sometimes imagination that has to be used when you're visualizing characters. Do you feel like you would get some of that even if you had been playing a quote unquote like Western European character, because they see you at the table, they immediately put those traits onto your character even if you're really not playing it?
Well, for me, when I, when I started and I was dungeon mastering, I was constantly putting people of different diversities, people of different body types into my games.
Mm-hmm.
And for my players, it was very normal.
Mm-hmm.
And when I played at particular tables of other people's dungeon mastering, it was always like this character being so exotic and being
Right.
out of the norm, per se, if they were not Eurocentric in complexion or characteristic. And so I definitely feel like being the only Asian person at the table, it did stick out that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I was the darkest person there. But I think also, you know, I want to play as characters who look like me. I want to, you know, have that strength or the compassion or the skill just existing as a person. And I feel like being in person kind of has that tendency on me as a player. And it also reflects onto my characters because, you know, everybody at the table is seeing you. So that's definitely something that I've tackled before. And writing this book and doing all of the work for this book, I was like, I just want people who look like me to be able to see themselves in games and not feel like they're the exotic character.
Right.
Have you experienced any of the same sort of stuff, Josh?
Oh my God. I'll go on record and say that I have tried to play a samurai character once ever. And one person assumed that I was doing it because, you know, I really liked anime. And the other person thought I was doing it because, you know, I'm Asian. So, of course, I'm playing the Asian character. When in reality, it was, no, I just really like Samurai Jack.
I'm notorious for playing samurais and ninjas. So, I mean,
Yeah.
I've done more than
And,
probably
like-
anyone in my group. So,
And like, that's totally fine. The issue was people assuming that I am doing these things because of an assumption of me rather than really knowing the reason. And having this, and like, if it's an assumption, it's whatever, you can fix the assumption. But when the assumption is I'm doing X because I am Asian,
Right.
it's a little demeaning. It's a little trivializing.
right.
I am the only, you know, non-Caucasian person in my normal Friday group, and I've never thought anything of it. But whenever we're out in public and talking and whatnot, I had to learn to realize the fact that, like, I am the only Asian person in this group. If I do anything that's too, you know, extreme or weird, people might assume that they're not going to assume that, like, I'm doing it because I'm a weird person, which I definitely am. Do you see my logo? They're going to assume that I'm doing it because, you know, Asian people are weird.
Yeah, I mean, that's something I've come across a lot with people, is that when you're the only person in the room, you become responsible for your entire group.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You are the example now.
Right.
And I mean, that's an awful spot to be in.
Because no one's going to associate that with me when I play my samurai. Like,
Yeah.
I never have that problem.
Not to say that 4chan is a bastion of wisdom, but I saw the screen capture from 4chan. I was talking about how you can safely make a white male protagonist and do whatever you want with him.
Yeah.
Because no one's going to assume that, you know, he is representative of all white men. But as soon as you make them, you know, Asian, you make them black, you make them Hispanic, or you make them a woman, all of a sudden people are going to be looking at you as you're making a statement about all people of that identifier.
Right. Yeah.
And it's part of us doing this book is to normalize, you know, Filipino culture, so that if you are using it, you're not doing a gimmick, you're not doing a weird thing, you're not being a special snowflake. It's, hey, you're just pulling from this. You're just pulling from this thing that, you know, can become common knowledge.
And I think that's another important thing too, because I think that's the one thing that we see people are willing to do with the European cultures that they're not willing to do with anything else. Is you could take that and you don't have to keep it in that setting,
right?
Like you could take that concept and put it anywhere. Like people have no problem taking the idea of a paladin, this holy warrior of some basically Catholic mythos church, and tossing it into any setting that it's in, and it's fine.
Right.
Like they have no problems doing that. But then like they don't want to take like a character that is something from an Eastern culture and put it in there unless the entire setting is Eastern.
Well,
and
I mean, just look at the backlash people have against the monk.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that's a great example. Like,
You know,
right.
like whatever that nonsense is.
There's this poet I listened to for like forever ago. I haven't seen any of his new stuff, but he had this thing where he's talking about it's okay to go like see Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, because, you know, even if they're Asian people in Asia, speaking Asian, wearing Asian clothing, and it's totally fine that they're kissing people because they're only kissing other Asian people. It's that kind of not wanting to see things at all in other things that like they're not normally seen in. Because D&D is predominantly a Eurocentric game. And
it came out of those roots for sure.
Yeah. And the desire to have, you know, other cultures represented in D&D started with the man himself, started with Gary Gygax. And so it's built into its roots of, we want this game to be for anyone. It should be for anyone. And even if there was a misstep in the creation of Oriental Adventures, the fact that his intention was inclusivity still rings out with us.
Yeah, I think there's going to be things which you look back in retrospect and see problems, but in the time we're progressive, you know, and it's important to kind of recognize those, you know, areas where you can improve, things that you can do better, but to recognize steps along the way.
Yeah, and to not have it marginalized to be like one specific like race. Is it like, oh man, okay, so this is going to be the kobolds. Kobolds do this now. Like that's what kobolds are. Like, you know, you're not putting it just in that one. This is an orc thing or a goblin thing. Like to make it broad enough that it can be in with monstrous races if you want to, but also with just the standard player races as well, and to make sure it's not shoved into this group of, well, since it's not Western, it's got to be something foreign and alien. So put it over there with one of the monster races or something, like, and have it corner hold over into that or anything like that either.
Now, not to completely derail conversation because it's a super interesting topic, but we did have a question a while back about the Oath of Blood Paladin. People wanting to know what that was.
Haha, yeah.
Oh, someone's doing reading.
There's been like 6 or 7 messages about it, and I was like, what are they talking about?
So I'm overseeing the different subclasses, and when I was making them, I wanted to tie them into the culture, a historical thing, or something from the mythology. So on the mythology side, we have the Moon Eater Patron Warlock. We have the Volcano Domain Cleric. And then from the historical side, we have the College of Sedai bards who tell the Filipino epics and tell the stories of past heroes. The Oath of Blood Paladin came from this weird spot in the middle of it, where family and the people you're with and the people who you are loyal to, that is your entire world. They have to come first, because without them, you are alone in a world full of people who aren't on your side, aren't with you, and in a book with all kinds of terrifying monsters, alone against all of that. And so we looked at tenets and like the kind of feel of a paladin, and what is a paladin if not someone who is devoted singularly to a specific cause or person? And the idea behind it, because Lucia is a very much a visual person. I'm the kind of person who wants a simple visual with some text to it. And when I was envisioning the Oath of Blood Paladin, I was imagining when someone like takes the sword in their hand and slits the middle of their palm to sign some agreement or to fulfill an oath or a bargain.
Sure. Yeah.
And so the Oath of Blood Paladin is someone who devotes himself to a singular cause or a person or a group, be it some otherworldly spirit, be it to your chieftain, be it to someone in your party or the party themselves. It's through that loyalty, unwavering, that you get your powers.
Huh. That's really neat. I like that. That's really cool.
That's cool. Yeah, there you go, everyone. There's your blood paladin.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we got that question in there, and it turned out to be a pretty good one. Yeah, there's a bunch of them. Looking here, the subclasses. There's Barbarian Oath of the Black River. There's the College of Sede Bard, Volcano Domain Cleric, Circle of the Tides Druid. Is that Kowal for the fighter?
Kowal, yeah.
Kowal, okay. Way of Kalulua. Yeah, my tongue just said nah. Just stop in the middle of that word.
Don't worry, I had to teach mine to behave when I was doing this kind of stuff. It's like we've talked about 2 monsters already, where it's like Mananankal and the Mandarankal. Looking at those 2 things in the same sentence made me want to scream.
Well, I'm looking at the Ranger one now, so it's Mangangaya?
Close. Mangangaya.
Mangangaya.
So when the book comes out, is there like a glossary with these terms that have like the pronunciations in there so we can try to get them right? Like if I get this book, unless I want to run this thing on stream, like I'm going to butcher all these names if I don't have some pronunciations there somewhere. This is I don't think I've gotten close yet in my head. Luckily, I haven't actually tried to say very many of them.
So yes, we will have pronunciation guide. The only question is if we're going to put it in the front or the back of the book. But for anyone who might be listening, you have our forgiveness if you have trouble with the language.
You heard it here first, folks.
I think for some of those longer, harder words, the dictionary pronunciation right under it, so that you're not having to like flip back and forth. Like, how do I pronounce those A's again? Or
have you tried running these things to like Google Translate? Have you? Say it so you can see if it comes out right there. So you know.
Can I tell you the worst part about what you just said? Google Translate will not pronounce it properly.
It won't. No. Okay, so that's what I was gonna say. Like, because that's what I would fear people would do, right? If you don't have a pronunciation, they're gonna throw it in there here, however it says it, and assume that's right. They're not gonna know any better, so they're just gonna run with it, and then it'll just be wrong for.
Yeah, I put Mangangaya through Google Translate and came up with Mangangaya.
Oh yeah, see. It's sadly, see, you could tell that Google Translate was designed for dumb white guys like me, because that's probably how I said it in my head too when I looked at it. So
put it through the Translate, bring it back to English. It comes out hysterically.
It comes out right.
If you want new song lyrics, by the way, do that. It's like put it into like Aramaic or something and bring it back. It is amazing. So one other thing I want to get in before we kind of get to our wrap up point, because we're quickly approaching it somehow.
We're getting there.
Is there are some further options. We've already talked about some of the classes. We've talked about boat combat. We've talked about, well, we didn't talk about it, but there's going to be new spells, it looks like, a couple backgrounds. But there are new options for pre-existing races. So how are the races different in this setting than they are in a more, typical game session?
Well, we definitely wanted to take a lot of those like really familiar races and make them, either a variation, or for some of them completely redesign them because their pre-existing description feels a little uncomfortable in this kind of setting.
Yeah, a little out of place. Yeah.
Even in general, like the big one that we tackled was the half orc.
Okay.
And so we had nailed down like a couple of them that were like really strong, like the volcano dwarves. We were super excited about.
That sounds pretty cool.
And the half orcs, we were kind of like, either we have to figure out a way for a half orc entity to already exist, or we have to explain why orcs are in this setting.
Mm-hmm.
And so the way that we were kind of working through it was I was going through the existing player's handbook, and for half-orcs, the monster manual, because they're detailed more in depth there.
Mm-hmm.
And I was reading about the half-orcs, and a lot of the description for it was uncomfortable to read.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, for sure. Yeah.
one of the descriptions is that they are very like scars are very significant to have in the pre-existing example, and even if they came from like slavery or battle, they would wear them. It just didn't sit right with me to include something like that. And there's been a lot of talk about how half-orcs and hobgoblins and these like monstrous races kind of impact our idea of their real life influence.
Right.
Because orcs were kind of originated from not necessarily like a heavily racist place, but just that the influence of them
that realm, yeah.
wasn't, you know. So
I'm with you.
I remember I was sitting on my living room floor, and I was on the phone with Joshua, and I was like, what are we going to do with half-orcs? Because this whole idea of an entire race being created for, you know, war and rage, and the way that they talked about them having children, it was all just very like icky. I didn't want it. So we were...
A lot of people struggle with that in their games too, like what to do with them. So.
Yeah, I wasn't making a face at what you were saying, by the way. Clint put a spider on my face again. Yeah, those are some important topics to be careful with for sure. Like, I know they have those cards coming around now that can help people navigate these challenging topics.
And so the origin story of orcs as it is that there was a basically like a dark god lord who created them to wage war and do his evil biddings, and then some of them stumbled into relationships with humans or other races. And at least for me, I've always kind of gravitated towards monstrous races because a lot of the influences that they use for them in the books are from non-Eurocentric themes. Because if you look at the official art for especially hobgoblins, their armor is very specific to a kind of culture.
very specific.
And so half-orcs were something that I wanted to be able to play and feel proud of. And so in our book, half-orcs aren't half-orcs. They're called the Balat Kayo, which means masked person. And it comes from Halia, who mentioned before was one of the goddesses of the moons who protects the world from the giant Ian. And when she took up arms and decided to, you know, fight the dragon, she was given a mask of this like beautiful gold, made of gold and stars, and she defended the world while she had her face covered. And so that's where their imagery comes from, is like the tusks on her mask are the tusks of the half-orcs, and they were created in her image so that they could still have that warrior feel, because Halia is a warrior. But she was also very beautiful, and so half-orcs, or the Balat Kayo, still have that monstrous tusk appearance, but they're beautiful, and they still have that warrior tendency, but not because they're like a raging race, but because they're there to protect, you know, their space. And a lot of the mythology goes that at a certain time, people in the Philippines would carry out these rituals to summon her so that she could fight the dragon. And so Balat Kayo bios are her vessel to carry out that ritual when it's due.
Gotcha.
So
that's really cool.
Yeah.
So
that
lots of new turf to kind of go over and lots of new ways of looking at characters.
Yeah. So that one was really important. One of my other favorite ones, our version of Tiefling, which is based more on the Carabao, which is like our like they carry all the heavy loads for farming specifically. And so we tied that back into the kind of infernal legacy with farms pre-colonially, when they weren't in terrace forms, were usually created by where they burn down a part of the forest, and then the ash kind of helps fertilize the crops and whatnot. So tieflings had that tied into their bloodline of the Carabao influence. So if you look at pictures of them, their horns are super, they're kind of like straight out, and then they go up in these like really long crescents. So you're getting like these really nifty horns as as these kinds of tieflings.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's just so many really fascinating and interesting things that look like they're going to be in this. And I'm really happy to have had you guys on to talk about it. Once again, we need to make sure we plug where people can go find this.
I just linked it there again just a minute ago. So
it's definitely in there. So check it out. There's 10 days left on that. I know some of you have already backed it, but definitely go in there and check it out. Make sure you put your support behind it, because I'm pretty excited about this. This would be really fun to play in. It's a different flavor, different chance to explore a culture, learn something. And we just need more of this sort of thing.
For sure. So
I guess we're kind of outroing here. Is there anything else you'd like to really point out? Anything you want to plug? Anything you want to really say that we haven't got to?
Man, I mean, just yeah. If you're wondering if you can run the book, we are including a guide. Our thoughts on if you're not Filipino and you want to run the book. If you want to run the book but you don't want to disrespect the names, have a pronunciation guide in there, we promise. And we really hope you like it. You are also, if you support the book and support us as creators, the entire team is Filipino. So all of the art, all of the writing, the research is all done by, people who really wanted to share this culture with me and with Joshua. I was calling Paladin.
Gotcha.
So when you're supporting this project, you are also supporting directly the people who it means a lot to. So
that's fantastic. And it looks like kind of a relatively small team there. It was 12 of you? From what I count?
There's more of us that are definitely kind of waiting for actually gets funded, and there are definitely more artists that I've reached out to that I really want to bring on. But I do really want to highlight our wonderful artist, Roxanne Sparks, who did our cover art and who's doing our GM screen art. Does beautiful work. I'm so proud of having her on this project. Betha, who did our character art, is wonderful. We've had so many young creatives from the Philippines and from here, all of them reconnecting or finding even more strength in their culture. So that was really important to me.
And it's beautiful. I mean, you look at the art, it immediately sucks you in. And the layout of the pages, at least on the Indiegogo, are just, I really like the way it's laid out. It flows really well, draws your eye. It's interesting all the way around. There's no space on the page that looks wasted.
Yeah, that's Joshua.
Thank you for feeding my ego.
Stroke. There it is.
Oh, yeah.
But okay, and Joshua, now that I've puffed you up a little bit there, is there anything you would like to say as we exit out?
Yeah, sure. So a small thing that we're really proud of being able to do, Lucia is very much the person who believes in paying someone what they're worth and what they should be paid. And it's a very much a big joy for me, because I had to talk to potential writers for this. And when I was getting their rates, a lot of them said they were doing 5 cents a word, 2 cents a word. And it was such a joy to tell them that our rate for paying them is 10 cents a word.
Wow.
Wow.
And a lot of our funding, if we ever got to the stretch goals, it would just be to pay our artists and writers more. Because we've been in places as artists and creators of like putting something out there and having someone tell us, no, you should be doing this for less. And it's a horrible, guttural feeling. And a large part of our budget is just going to be going back into paying people their rates, not what our budget can pay for. Because we're fitting our budget around our writers and our artists.
That's great.
That's something I want to make clear to people when they ask, like, why do you need $31,000? Well, because people make good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to pay artists what they're worth. Whether they're writing or they're painting or whatever. I mean, there's so much that goes into it. There's so much talent and so much joy that comes out of it. It deserves to be, treated like with great respect. So, that's fantastic. Are we going to see you guys in any cons anytime soon? I know some people here are going frequently to cons. I'll be going to a ton this year. I'd love to see you guys there.
Yeah. So next week is PAX U, right?
Yep.
We are going to be there. I was so generously gifted tickets by Critical Bard on Twitter.
Nice.
I was so happy to win them unexpectedly. So we'll both be there. Both me and Joshua will be there. We're hoping to hit Gary Con next year, and then I think the next one after that is D&D Live.
Nice.
Yep. Next year we're hoping to hit up. I think I have these in order, but Gary Con, D&D Live, Gen Con, Gamehole Con, and if PAX U is a pleasant experience for us, then PAX U.
Nice. Well, I'll be at least 3 of those, so I hope to see you guys there.
We'll definitely be at Gen Con. We know that one for sure. So
for sure. For my own side of things, I want to make sure that everyone knows that if they want to see this episode again that we just did live, you could find it in all of our previous episodes on our YouTube channel. So we'll be putting those links out as soon as I get those up. And that's over at TableTop, spelled out, the number 2, keyboard spelled out, all one word. And that'll get you all of our backlog. And there's been quite a few. We're actually almost ready for season 2 already. Woo!
Yeah. January, we're starting season 2 for almost all of our programs here at Tabletop to Keyboard. So, so some of them are not like ending and we're starting new seasons. Like my Zweihander game is going to keep on rolling, but it'll officially be part of season 2 as well. So.
Yeah, so if you're interested in this sort of stuff, we do a show like this every Monday with different guests, different topics, and we have a lot of fun each time, and we appreciate our guests every time. In addition to that, we also run a tabletop game, so we have a schedule down below in the panels you can watch, and that's our Everstorm game. And so if you want to see some 5e and some fun that we have there, come check us out. We also play video games randomly, usually on Wednesday nights. We've been playing Vermintide 2, where the audience can come in and really, really stick it to us with some awful things. So that's a lot of fun. People enjoy.
Yeah, it's a super cool experience where if you're in the Twitch chat, you can vote for things, and the programming of the game can read the chat, and it makes those things happen, and it's pretty fantastic.
Yeah, and Air Laser is pointing out down below that we also just uploaded all of the Unreal Engine videos that Crazy Ike has been putting together for our Dungeons & Dragons games.
Those are really awesome.
They're from the perspective of the characters. They talk about their feelings and their opinions about what's going on in the plot. So it'll help you kind of a little bit get caught up on the storyline, and they are just freaking stunning.
If you're not familiar, Unreal Engine is a video game engine used to design video games. So it's high level quality graphics that we put as an intro for our D&D game. So if you haven't checked those out, you can find those in the collections here on Twitch. You can also find them in a much easier to watch form on YouTube. There's a playlist of them, and you can check them all out there.
Yeah, they're great. I've watched them a couple times myself.
I watched them all again today just because I hadn't seen them in a while.
Yeah. And then, Dustin, what can we do to find you? I know you're up to some stuff. Swihender.
Yes, I'm up to stuff. So, of course, most of the time you will find me here on Tabletop to Keyboard. Monday nights here on the Wisdom Check with Jeff. Every other Thursday, my Terra and Treefell horror-inspired Zweihander RPG game takes place 9 p.m. Central Time. Next game, I'm burning one player at the stake. So that'll be good. That's what we're starting out with. So who knows where it goes after that. I'm sure her next character will be just as beloved as her current one. And then the following day, that's not this week. This week is Thanksgiving. Everyone go have a great Thanksgiving. Sea of Thieves is not going to happen this week because of Thanksgiving. So those of you who are a big fan of our D&D DM Levi, who plays Sea of Thieves with us with his crazy accents, you will have to wait another couple weeks before you get to see that again, because the holiday is going to interrupt our regularly programmed schedule. But the following week, we will be back for Wisdom Check. We'll be back for Terra and Treefell on Thursday, and then that Friday I play on Grim and Perilous Gaming, the home of Zweihander, and I am playing in a Zweihander game there, where I play a battle nun named Miguel, who's a halfling and the master of the low blow.
Naturally. And don't forget also, we are affiliated with Stream Team, and that includes the Grouch Couch, Air Laser, and the Liching Hour, who have all been hanging out in the chat with us, and they have some wonderful content. You can find their streams down below in the panels as well, so go give them a check out. And I think that pretty much concludes us, unless we want to tease our next guests.
It's Anna B. Meyer.
That's right.
Next week, next Monday, cartographer.
Yeah, so she's putting together some amazing maps for role-playing games over the years, and she's got some phenomenal techniques on how to do that. I know we got some people in our Discord channel that are taking their time working on that sort of stuff. And Joshua, if you're interested in looking at this as you're putting together maps soon, she has made some new software to deal with it. So it is pretty cool. I'm looking forward to that one, and that'll be next Monday.
I'll check it out then.
Perfect. So thank you both for coming on. Thank you, chat, for being here and keeping us company. I appreciate you all, and we'll see you next Monday.
Peace out.